Well, we've got some overheating problems on the Lincoln, so let's go over those and see if we can resolve them. All right, before I forget, I'll check my tape. What's staying in there? I was listening to some Bob Seger. Got a ton of cassettes. See, I got a ton. All right, so let me fill y'all in. I drove it probably 30 miles, maybe 40, and you can run 65 all day long, I think. It'll run about 3/4 in the normal range, so it'll run a little pointer device. Well, I don't have anything. Trying to think if we can do it like that. It'll run, it's about like that, let's say 65. Start pushing it to 70 and it's about right there. So I was running 70. I was trying to see if it would go past that mark, and what happened is I ran into traffic, and so I exited to turn around because I didn't want to just sit in traffic. I'd just turn around and come back home. And the time it took to, sitting in the traffic to exit and getting through the U-turn and all that, it was here. Taking it easy back on the freeway, the temperature started to come back down. So to me, that tells me overheating on the freeway, to me, is a lot of time. I'm not gonna say all the time, but to me, that indicates some kind of a radiator issue, in that it should have plenty of airflow driving on the freeway. So that should take that out of the equation. I mean, you could have maybe a thermostat sticking or something like that, but I know the thermostat's working. I tested the thermostat. It's got 180-degree thermostat in it. You could have a collapsing radiator hose or a water pump impeller issue or something like that. But typically, my first thought, overheating on the freeway, and especially since then, because the radiator just, if it can't cool, it gets heat soaked. And further proving that point to me was once we stopped the mass amounts of airflow going through that radiator, of driving on the freeway, and we came to a stop, the fact that it really started to heat up then kind of further makes me think we've got a radiator issue. So let's address that. All right, cold start. We're gonna do one pump, set the choke. I think I need to turn up the high idle for choke. I think it's a little low, so let's just see. Turn that off. Well, maybe not. That's pretty good. I think that's actually perfect. This thing runs good. I am extremely happy with all choices made on this thing. Leave it right there. Yeah, it's not perfectly smooth, but it is cold. And this cam's got a pretty smooth idle, but it is not a perfectly smooth idle. All right, let's get busy working. All right, so here we go. Gotta fill y'all in on a lot of stuff here. So, did some research. The Thunderbird, and I think the Torino, and maybe a few others, or I may be wrong. This was 2 days ago, I was looking this up. They take an 1.5 inch narrower radiator. They take a 28-inch core radiator. So I'm here editing and realize I need to clarify something real quick. I keep saying Lincoln. What I'm referring to is Lincoln Continental. The Lincoln Continental takes the 29.5 inch radiator, but the Lincoln Mark series takes a 28-inch radiator, just like the Thunderbird, but the Continental and like a Grand Marquis take a 29.5. Now, somewhere along the way, somebody decided that, you know, hey, it's close enough to fit the Lincoln. Let's say it fits Lincoln. And that's what's happened. So the Lincoln, and I think the Grand Marquis, and maybe the LTD, maybe a few others, take a 29.5 inch radiator, and the others, I think like the Thunderbird and some others, take a 28 inch. Well, now they've put those together, and they've said a 28 inch radiator fits the Lincoln, which technically it doesn't. Now, I did also find, I think it's Radiator Express, don't quote me on that, maybe I'll put it down here somewhere. In an eBay listing, they actually even state that hey, beware of other eBay listings that say, you know, the Thunderbird or whatever radiators will fit Lincoln. They will not. You know, at some point somebody messed that up. They've got a 28-inch radiator. The Lincoln's got a 29.5. It doesn't fit. And we made ours fit, but technically it doesn't fit. Now, that's a lot to say there. But I will also say that, you know, the Thunderbird, for example, came with, or you could get it with a 460 with that 28-inch radiator. So the 28-inch radiator in itself, just because it's an 1.5 inch narrower, doesn't mean it's not up to the demands, or it's not up to the task of cooling a 460. Should be fine. Then also, I started thinking, this is a 4-core aluminum radiator. This thing had a 3-core copper radiator in it. And, you know, even though this thing's got probably an extra inch of, you know, core width, there should be no reason why this radiator is not able to cool this Lincoln if it doesn't have issues. I'll get to that. So, you know, this radiator should have extra capacity. And, you know, I said if I could get the right radiator, we would just replace it. I can get it. So Rock Auto's got a copper one, which is like $274. But again, you know, I'm thinking in my head, well, two things. One, that copper one, even though it's 3-core, I think it's about a 1/2 inch or so narrower than our stock radiator. It's the same amount of cores, but it's narrower. I'm thinking, well, that's probably a little less cooling capacity. And then they have some aluminum ones. I think they have two, a 2-core and a 3-core. But I think the 3-core is like $390 or something. I mean, it's a lot of money. And then I found a few other listings of different, you know, radiators. You know, Radiator Express has got one. You can get a 3-core aluminum. I want to say it's like $320 or so. Don't quote me on that. It may be a little less than that. Maybe that was their thicker 3-core. They have a thicker 3-core. But again, we've got a 4-core slightly smaller dimensions, this thing should cool. So I don't want to, if I have to, I will buy another radiator. I will buy a 29.5 inch, probably from Radiator Express. Is probably my best option. And I'll probably buy the 3-core, because in theory that 3-core radiator should cool better than our copper radiator. So we should have better cooling capacity than the 3-core copper, is my thought. You know, if we're gonna spend about close to the same price, I think the aluminum one would be the better option. It seems to be a good quality, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I keep thinking back to when I first got this thing running. You know, I flushed this block. You know, I put a hose in it, flushed it, but once I started it up and that stuff started circulating around, it was so rusty. Even though I flushed it, there was, you know, after the engine warmed up, you know, rust released from the block, and it was so rusty. And I did do a flush on this radiator. Not necessarily for the radiator, I was wanting to flush the block. And I ran some Blue Devil through it, you know, just their quick method where you pour it in and then you run it for so long and then you dump it and then flush it. That's what I did. So my thoughts are, in theory, this radiator should be fine. There should be no reason why it shouldn't cool the engine. And I keep going back, it's gotta be the radiator. We could have an issue with, you know, the lower radiator hose if it's collapsing. I can't remember if that one's got a spring in it. It's a new hose. I don't think that's likely. I think we are dealing with, this radiator just got plugged up with rust when this thing started up, and we're dealing with a plugged radiator. So I want to try to, before I spend, you know, $300 on a radiator, I don't want to do that because I've already spent, you know, I already bought a radiator. So if we can save this radiator, I want to try to save it. So I was looking at different flushes. I really wanted to try the Thermocure. It's I think it's a CRC product, Evapor Rust, and maybe is it CRC product or a CLR product? I don't remember. But anyway, it's an Evapor Rust cooling system flush. It's made to flush out rust. So my thought was that was probably our best option because I feel like we are plugged up with rust. But I couldn't get it for about 5 days. So the only place I could really find it was on Amazon. It wasn't Prime. It was gonna take 5 days to get here. I really want to start working on this thing. I don't want to let it sit for that long. You know, that's just me. I just want to do something. I don't want to just sit and do nothing while I'm waiting. So I came up with this idea. This is supposed to be some really good stuff. This Irontite, is it Irontite? Yeah, Irontite Thoro-flush. It's a commercially used flush. It's a powder. So you take this, you dissolve it in like a gallon of water, and then you pour it in. So I've drained the cooling system as much as I could out of it. Also pulled the thermostat because I want coolant, you know, running through all the time, you know, as fast as it can. You know, we pull that thermostat out, we're gonna have coolant trying to flow quickly. It'll still generate enough heat to work well. So we're gonna go with this. You run this for 12 minutes. After we get up to operating temperature, you run this for 12 minutes, and it says do not run longer than 12 minutes, and then you dump it. And then we will flush the system out. We'll put a radiator, or, you know, a hose in here and undo whatever and flush and make sure we get this stuff completely out of the system. And then we're gonna run some Blue Devil. Like I said, I don't know how good this stuff is. I ran some of it before when I was trying to clean the block out, but I wasn't confident this stuff would do it by itself, but I wanted something I could leave in here long term, you know, to be able to drive it with that stuff in it and just kind of let it do its thing. And Blue Devil is one of the ones that you can do that with. So, you know, you can do a quick flush, which is what I've done previously with this, or you can put this stuff in the cooling system and go drive it. It says go drive it. I think it's like 3 or 4 hours or over a period of several days. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put this in it and just kind of let it just do its thing. And we'll see what we end up with. We can kind of look down here and see the rust staining on this. So my theory is if we can get it to where something's taking away that rust stain, then it may be, you know, clearing some of that rust out. So, like I said, we'll start with the Irontite Thoro-flush. And then after we get that flushed completely out of the system, make sure none of it's left in there, we're gonna put the Blue Devil in it and then we'll drive it. Now, if that doesn't work, I will order the Thermocure and we will put that in. And it's kind of the same process. We'll just put it in there and drive with it and just kind of let it do its thing. But I figure this is worth the effort to do all this, to try to save this radiator, because, you know, it should be up to the task of this engine. 4-core aluminum radiator. It's hard for me to condemn this radiator, you know, and spend, you know, probably let's just say $350 on a 3-core properly fitting radiator. And it may be less cooling capacity than this one would be, you know, if it was not plugged, you know, 4-core aluminum. So that's kind of where we are. Yes, I could spend $350 and we would have one that fit properly, but it might not cool as well as the one we've already got, that we've already paid for. So let's see if we can fix this one and get this thing to where it will run on the highway and not creep up on temperature. So I don't know if y'all want to watch or not, but figure if you're here, you're watching. I've got maybe 1/4 of a gallon in here, and as you can see, I mean, this stuff is a powder. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take it and dump it in this. This is just a used, oh man, it's like fizzing and bubbling. I've already, you know, like I said, I drained the coolant out. I mean, not all of it, but what was in the radiator basically, and pulled the thermostat. All right, we've got all that out. And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put more water in here, put the lid on it, shake it up, add it back, and then just fill it with, you know, garden hose water that we're gonna use to flush, and then we'll put, you know, filtered water back in it when we're ready to put coolant back in. But we've got a long road ahead of us before we do that. So, yeah, where's the nozzle? This thing sticks. I'm not gonna do this on the car in case it like bubbles out and this stuff is like corrosive and I don't want to get it on the paint. Over here on the side, just gonna throw in some coolant in here, or some water. I guess water is our coolant. I've got about 3/4 of a gallon of water in here. I think that's enough. And of course it says to do it with a gallon, but I want some room to be able to shake this thing. Put the lid on, I'm just shaking it up. Make sure all that stuff is dissolved. You don't want, you know, powder left in the bottom of this jug once we pour it. All right, that's some pretty good shaking. All right, so I think to make this easier, well, let's do two things. One, let me get my little camera and we're gonna go down in this radiator and we're gonna look and see what it looks like right now. My little inspection camera. And that'll help us know if we've done any cleaning. So we'll do this. We'll look at it, a pre-cleaning look and then a post-cleaning look, and see if we've improved the cleanliness of the radiator. It looks pretty bad right now. Pretty rusty. All right, as you saw, it's pretty nasty inside, but it's hard to tell from looking at the cores. I mean, we can't see, we can just see the entrance of them. They look clear, but I mean, they could easily be plugged up further down, or further towards the middle. They could be plugged, or further down in the radiator, it could be plugged, and maybe only our top part that we're looking at is clear. I don't know. So I'm gonna grab my funnel and let's get this thing filled up real quick. If you don't have one of these, you need to get one. Maybe I'll put a link in the description. There's a couple different manufacturers that make them. This one's by EP Auto. It works well. So you just find your adapter that fits on here. That red one fits. And so we take our red piece right here and put it like that, and so that goes down and seals, and then our cap goes on, and then we don't need these other pieces, and we could put an angled thing on it if we wanted to, whatever. We don't need it on this. Let's set these. Probably not a good idea to set those on the car. I'll move them in a minute. And this piece, of course, goes on here. This is your plug. So if you end up putting too much coolant in, and you've got some left in the funnel, you can put this plug in, take this off. Coolant cannot escape the funnel. And you go back over to your coolant jug, take it out, and just put the stuff back in the jug. Works really well. So let's take this stuff, set it to the side, and let's give a few more shakes in case it's settled in that amount of time. I've probably drained 2 or 3 gallons out, so we're gonna have to add quite a bit of water back in, but let's add our now red water. This was just clear water. There was no coolant in this jug. That Thoro-flush turned it red. And when it seemed pretty fizzy when I was putting the water in. You just want to make sure you drain enough out that you can put all this in, So I'm always of the thought of I'll drain too much out to make sure, because I don't want to get like half of this in here and it be full, and then I'm like, well shoot, what do I do? And then I'm like, well, I gotta drain more to put more in, but then am I draining some of the flush stuff out? So that's my thought. So what I'm gonna do to add more water, because we need more, I'm gonna put some more water in this jug, shake it around, make sure we get all of the Thoro-flush out of the jug and into our radiator. Like I said, this spray nozzle gets stuck. It's really stuck now. I mean, it's not just stuck, it's just not working. All right, let's just put this under the tire so it's not spraying everywhere. It's just spraying outside the shop. I was going to shake this. I can't turn the water off yet because I need it, but I don't want it spraying in the shop or that hose whipping around. Yeah, it's slightly red tinted still. Let's look. I think that's got it all out. So I think what we're going to do now is I'm going to take the funnel off because I want to look down in the radiator, and I think I'm going to go ahead and just start it up and watch. With it low on coolant, I'll be able to see, you know, I'll be able to see the coolant going through the radiator, and we can kind of see how well it's flowing. Let's get this out of the way. And I'm gonna, yeah, I'll leave y'all going for a minute. I'll bring y'all closer. All right, so you can see, you know, some coolant kind of bubbling through, but what I'm trying to show y'all, you can't see. For it, I guess. What I saw was down, pretty far down, was a core, you know, core of the radiator that was shooting coolant out, like it was flowing really well. But no cores around it were shooting water. You would think at that same level you would have more cores shooting water, but they were not. It was just that one shooting water. So to me, that tells me that the cores around it were plugged. Now, look, to me they're looking like they're starting to flow more. See? Thermostat's out. So I feel like that Thoro-flush is starting to really clean them out. They're definitely flowing more than they were. The other thing this tells me, look how low our coolant is. Our coolant is probably halfway down on the radiator. But on the what we've got is we're flowing coolant all the way to the top. So to me that tells me that the radiator is not flowing very well, and the coolant is all the way up on that side and pushing through. I would think if it was flowing well, we probably would not see that much coolant coming out at the top. We'd be seeing more flowing around the bottom. But I feel like it's backing up on that side of the radiator. We're gonna add some more coolant in, and I'm gonna let this run for a while. Once this thing gets up to temperature a little bit, we will start our 12-minute timer. That doesn't start yet. We start 12 minutes from the time it warms up, till the engine warms up. All right, our temperature needle has moved up to the low end of normal range, probably 150-ish or so. So we're gonna say that's up temp, or up to enough temp to start our timer. So I'm gonna start a 12-minute timer,
And when that's up, we will shut this thing down. I'm going to bring it up to about 1500 RPMs or so to get that stuff flowing through a little better. And probably put a fan on here. I don't want this thing to overheat. And we know we've got a reduced capacity cooling system. So we want to run some air through this thing. Or maybe I'll just leave it and watch the temperature. Maybe that's the thing. I'll just watch the temperature, and if I need to, I'll put a fan on it. But 12 minutes, 1500 RPMs or so, and we're going to let that stuff flow through and hopefully do its job and get this thing cleaned out. Okay, so I've got the heater on because we want, our heater cord to be plugged up as well. But let me show y'all, we're at 12 minutes, I'm about to shut it off. So let's just show you what we've got. Perfect, but definitely better. So we're going to shut it off. I'm going to let it sit for a minute and cool down before I try to drain it. During that period of time, we got about 3/4 of the way into, I'm going to shut this water off. Got about 3/4 of the way into the normal operating temperature. So probably 200 or so degrees would be my guess. So definitely got this thing up to temperature. And yeah, I mean, it's still looking kind of sad in there, but I think it's better than it was. And we will flush it with water. We'll put the Blue Devil in it. And after we run the Blue Devil for a few days, if I feel like it's still not where it should be, we'll try that Thermocure. We're gonna try all the concoctions on this thing if we need to. Okay, so this is one way I like to do the flush. I've got hose stuck in there and just barely on, but you can see it's running over with water. And then I've got the drain just not completely undone, but it's cracked and draining. And I've let that, it's probably been going about 10 minutes. And I know that's not, what we need to do is dump the coolant. And we will, but I'm gonna start it up and let it run a few minutes like this. With this circulating like this will help. We'll end up pushing some, not just fresh water, some of the nasty stuff right here. And we're gonna let that run and kind of flush. And then we'll shut it off and pull that completely, dump it, and fill it a couple times, flush it a couple times, but I'm gonna do this first. See, we're getting some of that red, foamy stuff coming up now. And I've got the heater on, so I'm gonna run this a few minutes and let that circulate. We're pumping fresh water in, it's spitting this nasty stuff out, and we're also draining some down at the other end. We're gonna let this run a few minutes and then shut it off and dump the coolant completely. All right, so I completely removed the drain plug. The drain plug has a slot in it, so you can loosen it a little bit, and it'll come out that slot. That's how I had it running, so it was a good stream coming out, but it wasn't, just pouring out like it is now. So, of course, we got the engine. After we ran it with the water hose like that, it slowly cooled the temperature way down to where we were below normal operating temperature. And so, because we've got cool water coming into the radiator, we were cooling the engine down slowly. It was not hot either, and we slowly cooled it down. We're not hurting it in any way. So now, I shut it off, pulled that down completely, or pulled that out completely, and I've just got water running like that. And technically we are reverse flushing the radiator, because the natural flow, or the flow of the radiator is, it sucks it in from that bottom hose, goes in the engine, comes up, out this top hose, across the radiator, back down to the lower hose. So now what we're doing is we are coming from here and flowing this way. So we're reverse flowing to help, if anything's stuck, sometimes going backwards will help flow it out. So, and then we're flowing it out to the bottom. So we'll let that run for a while, and then we will probably put the plug back in it and run it again and get some more circulation going, and dump it again, and probably do that about 3 times of flowing, dumping, because we've got all the stuff out of the radiator. There's no more of that stuff in the radiator, but could be some still in the engine, and could still be some in the heater core. And that's why I was running this thing with the heater on, with the hose in there, to help flush some of that stuff out. But there's still going to be some in it, very much diluted at this point, but there's still some there. We want to make sure we get all of it out of the system, especially since we're going to put another flush chemical in here. We want to make sure we don't want some kind of chemical reaction going on in here that, causes damage. Plus that Irontite, Thoro-flush, is supposedly, it can harm cooling system components. I don't know if it eats gaskets, what it does, but they say do not run this stuff longer than 12 minutes. Get it out of the system. So we're going to make sure it's all out.
Okay, so y'all saw me do the Irontite flush, and it definitely made a pretty big difference, I think. Went ahead and did the Blue Devil afterwards. Left the thermostat out of it, filled it up with Blue Devil, and drove it for a week. Flushed the Blue Devil out, put the thermostat back in it, and drove it. And the overheating on the freeway is fixed. That is not happening. I can drive 70 miles an hour. It does not continue to creep up and, get hot. What isn't fixed is the sitting still. The temperature creeps up and up and up, and eventually, I think if you were sitting long enough, would overheat. Just like going through the school pickup line, you're kind of sitting for a while, and it's not even that long, maybe 10 minutes max, sitting there idling. Of course, this was in summer, and it's 90 plus degrees, but it was getting uncomfortably hot, and I think if I kept sitting there, it would probably eventually overheat. So wasn't happy with that. So I went ahead and ordered the Thermocure, and I did the same process with that. Dumped water out, put some Thermocure in, pulled the thermostat, ran the Thermocure for maybe a week, and then flushed the Thermocure out real good, and put, at that point, I put coolant back in it and a thermostat because I thought I was done. And unfortunately, it's still heating up when it's sitting still, like that school pickup line test. So at this point, we're gonna have to dig deeper into this, and this video is already really long. So we're gonna end this one here. We're gonna pick up in the next video and test out some other things. We've definitely improved it. At least we can drive on the freeway now, and it's not gonna overheat. But if I got stuck in traffic, in the heat of the day, it's gonna overheat. So that's gonna be a problem. I live in the Houston area. Traffic happens. So it's just not something we can gamble with, you know, with a freshly rebuilt engine. I don't want to be stuck in traffic. That's kind of the scary thing is, you know, you could be sitting there stuck in traffic, not being able to go anywhere. And I mean, you would eventually probably have to cut the engine off, because it's just going to creep up higher and higher. So that'll be coming up in the next video. I've got some ideas. So, and like I said, I actually did video the other two flushes, the Blue Devil and the Thermocure, but I probably had close to an hour of footage on those two flushes, and plus, you know, what all the footage we already have. And I figured y'all didn't need to watch 3 radiator flushes, so I just did the first one. I really think the first one was the one that made the biggest difference. That's where we could actually see, you know, as that coolant was flowing in, we could see it start to flow more. You can see that in that clip. That's not to say that it's a better product than the other two. You know, maybe if we would have ran one of the other ones first, you know, it would have done the same thing. I think the radiator was dirtiest the first. You know, it makes sense. So the first flush had the most to clean. And so, I don't know. Yeah, I think we definitely still have some problems. So we will address that again in the next video. Sorry I'm rambling, but like I said, I did cut out about an hour worth of footage in this, so we didn't need to make a whole movie. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below, hit the like button, and subscribe for more.